I've been asked to just to share some of my story and some of the things that have helped me through the ups and downs of navigating my way through life, which I'm sure we've all had those in different times. So I'm going to start with October 2010. Wow. How did I find myself here? Up the top of a mountain in Rwanda, in an orphanage, with a sea of faces looking out at me, watching eagerly for me to start. This little girl inside, who used to blush whenever anybody used to speak at her, is terrified, unsure if what I do at home works in this foreign land. Only 3 months ago, I was running a successful training consultancy business. This feels like a very different world. Will they like me? What are they thinking? What are they expecting? All sorts of doubts are flying around my mind. Have you ever had any of them? Meeting this young group of young genocide survivors just a few minutes ago had been so easy. We'd started off with dancing and singing to improvise beats of African drums on a bucket, because we're in an orphanage where they have nothing. Followed by some prayer and dancing again. But now here they are, waiting for me to speak. It's one of these things that when we get faced with a challenge every now and again in life, sometimes they can come along and they hit us. Other times, we self-select them. This was one of those times. I remember very clearly the day I decided to walk away from a lucrative corporate contract, because I just felt empty inside. I felt disconnected to the person that I knew was in there that I'd lost sight of. And whenever I used to watch film footage, we see it a lot at the moment on TV, of wars, of natural disasters, there was a part of me that would be desperate to go out and help. But I felt useless. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a fireman. So what do I have to offer? Well, this one particular day, I remember, it was because of a values clash. I was doing some consultancy work for an organisation, and I really, really did not like the way they'd been treating people. I'd been doing some work over in India, and I didn't like the way they were treating their staff out there. And I came back and I said, you know, I don't think you need me anymore. I've trained everybody up. I think I could just finish today. And I did. I left that day. And I can remember phoning my sister and going and meeting her in a bar in Edinburgh. It happened to be sunny, so we sat outside. And she said, well, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? I said, I have absolutely no idea. I said, but what I know is I want to do something that's meaningful. I want to do something that involves travel. I want to do something that involves young people, because I haven't been lucky enough to have my own children. And I want to do something where I feel that I'm making a difference in the world. Rewind another 25 years, and that's very different to where I started off at 16 in the investment world, where at that time, and probably still today, you can't get a job unless you have a degree. Somehow I managed to wangle my way in, because I don't take no's very well. I see them as a challenge. Does anybody else have the watch me in them? Just watch me. So by the age of 22, I'd become one of the youngest professionally qualified stockbrokers in the UK, living a life in the 80s. But hey, I was young. I look back at that kid and I think, who on earth were you? Because just did not resonate with who I am now. But all I cared about at that point was being able to move out of home and go on nice holidays, until I came to my senses and learnt a little bit more about life. So today what I'm going to share with you are just some of the insights, some of the things I've learnt along the way that help me live a life that's more authentic to me. What's authentic to me is very different to what will be authentic for you. So take from this whatever it is that will inspire you to connect to your heart and be more of the person that you would love to be. So at the core of all of this, it's actually about being true to ourselves. You know, actually taking the time to actually discover who we are again and living an authentic life, one where we're being true to ourselves, where we don't feel we have to pretend to be somebody we're not. And what I talk about is coming from a place of heartitude. And this is, I'm going to take you through, if you like, the model that I talk about in heartitude and the 9 principles that support it. But in essence, it's actually all about some of the things you've been hearing about today. It's about aligning your head, your thoughts, your feelings, your heart, and your actions to whatever it is that gives your life meaning, purpose, whatever that is. So what you see here is you've got a diagram up there, and this is all to do with the fact that when things are going well in life, when we're happy, there's generally an alignment of all of these things. Our head, our heart, our actions, and what it is that the reason that we're doing something or what gives our life greater meaning. Whenever we're not getting the results we want, it's usually because there's a misalignment. And if we look at this energetically, every single thought you have has an energetic frequency associated with it. Every single feeling you have has an energetic frequency associated with it. We are a soup of electrical frequency, a soup of our thoughts and our feelings. And at an energetic level, what we then start to radiate and attract around us is all dependent upon what goes on here. I used to be somebody that thought that happiness came from outside. It comes from within. And I noticed that some people that were on my workshop earlier on were a little bit unsure about how we can change our thoughts and feelings, which we can in most situations. So really what I'm going to be taking you through are just some ideas for what you can do to change how you feel, to put yourself in the best place to enjoy a happy and successful life in whatever way you define that. Because that, to me, is what life's about, being the best person that we can be for ourselves and also in terms of the way that we touch the lives of other people. Because we are always touching the lives of other people, and we can choose the impact that we want to have. So let's just go through some of the principles that I teach, that I write about, that I aim to live my life about. And I say aim because, like everybody else, I'm human. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. And the first of these principles that I talk about is engaging your heart. And this is about coming from a place of love, kindness, and compassion in your heart. One of peace, one of gratitude, of integrity. You know, in this world, we have so many people carrying about anger and resentment and frustration. The young genocide survivors that we do work with in Rwanda, these are people who have witnessed their families being murdered in front of them. Most of them have lived on the streets most of their lives. If they're lucky, they've been able to afford to pay to go to live in orphanages to get an education. But in Rwanda, you had 1 million children looking after themselves. There were no adults. And that's happening all around the world. So it's not necessarily unique to Rwanda. However, when it comes to the way they feel, they could harbour that resentment, that anger, that bitterness, the same feelings that drive terrorism in our modern world today. What we do over there is we teach them to neutralise those feelings. We teach them how to feel love, kindness, and compassion in their heart again. And they do. To the extent I have sat with people who sit and forgive those who've killed their families, which is beyond my comprehension. But that's what I've learned from these people. You know, it's a funny thing. When we go out and do humanitarian work, they think we're there to help them. And if I'm honest, I thought I was there to help them too when I first went out. What I discovered was, no, I've learned so much more from them. So this is about looking at what we can do in any situation. How can we be more loving, kind, caring, compassionate towards ourselves as much as to other people? You know, are you somebody who's kind to yourself? Or do you beat yourself up every time you get something wrong? Do you feed yourself abusive substances? Do you expose yourself to situations that aren't healthy for you? Or are you compassionate and caring? So it's a balance. Everything I'm going to take you through is a balance between how we treat ourselves and how we treat others. The next principle, which was a massive one, and a massive reason why I had to leave the investment world. I mean, I really don't know how I ended up there. I really don't. I used to call it the greed machine when I worked there. As a young female in a very male-dominated environment, where quite often I'd go along and be encouraged to wear the short skirts and serve the alcohol to people, because people didn't take me seriously. There was a massive values clash, because it was all, to me, my interpretation of it was making rich people richer. And I didn't see the satisfaction in that for me personally. I wanted to make a difference in the world. Now, we all have different motivators. I think Tom was talking about that earlier. We have different motivators. But it's important for us to find our own motivations. And if you do like to make a difference, be asking yourself, how can I make more of a difference, more of an impact in the world for others? But actually, just as important as that, be asking yourself, what would make the biggest difference to me? For any area of your life that is not going the way that you want it to be, what would make the biggest difference? The one single thing that you could do that would have a massive impact for you, make things easier. The third principle I talk about, and Waylon definitely stepped into this brilliantly this morning, is looking at how we can be the wonderful, unique, authentic beings that we were born to be. Every single person born into this world was born with so much potential. And yet what happens is, as we grow up, that can be knocked out of us. Some of us can master and work out our way through that. But a lot of the time, we can suppress who we think we are. We lose sight of that very, very early on. And being that authentic leader is actually about, it's a two-step process. One is actually taking the time to rediscover who are you, what makes you unique. And for a lot of us, we can be older before we actually even discover that. Because maybe our life experience hasn't even exposed us to our absolute talents. The people that we see on the TV or in athletics and sport have been exposed to their talents. Maybe you have talents you just don't know of yet. And once you start on this journey of exploring that, it's then about stepping into the leadership role and leading your own life. Choosing to start to make things happen for yourself. Because when we do that, we're more likely to get the results that we want. And sometimes it doesn't go where we think it's going to go, but at least we're moving forward. And that ties in nicely to the next principle, which is actually about taking responsibility for the thoughts that we have, for the feelings that we have, for the things that we do. Taking responsibility when things don't go well, but not beating ourselves up. Accepting, maybe I did the best I could. Because that's all any of us can do. In any situation, we can only do the best we can. We might look back and we might think that we would have done it differently or wish we'd done it differently. But that's not being kind to ourselves. Acceptance is. And choosing to learn from how we would choose to do things differently is. But it's about not putting our head in the sand. And sometimes when things go wrong, we can. I know I've done that too. We can avoid things. Because it's easier that way. In fact, it's a much easier way of life to ignore all of this in some respects. It isn't necessarily a happier life. If you want an easier and happier life, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. So it depends on what type of life you want for yourself. But certainly taking responsibility can make a huge, huge difference to the results that we have and what we experience. So principle 5 is all about choosing our thoughts and emotions for success. And I remember the first time somebody suggested that I could take control of what I had in here and what I had in here. And I know there were some skeptics in the workshop I did earlier. But you do genuinely have the most amazing piece of feedback, a biofeedback mechanism at your disposal that you can use to help you every day. It's free. It is your body. Has anybody ever felt any feelings? Yeah? Hopefully, we've felt a whole spectrum of feelings. That's what helps us be human. So it is healthy to have the highs and the lows. The highs and the lows. That's life. But you can manage them to a certain extent. You can probably manage them more than you think you can. You see, in the modern world, we have drugs that can help with that, legal or illegal, and they work. They can help us change how we feel. But in order for them to work, the body had to have something within it that happened naturally for the drugs to actually work. That's why things like endorphins were discovered, Because for the opiate drugs to work, there had to be the mechanisms within our body for the receptors to be there. We already have the ability within us to release a lot of drugs that will help us feel better. So I'm not saying not to take, prescribed drugs, but actually there are also other ways that we can look at changing how we think, changing how we feel. We don't have to tolerate. And it's about going and getting help. It's about going and getting support. It's about taking responsibility again. I remember one of the days when one of the times, I've been over to Rwanda now 10 times in the last 5 years. And I remember one of the volunteers who came over, I say girl, she's in her 70s, but yeah, girl, we're still young. And I can remember, I've told you a little bit about these young people, but they are just incredible the way, and in her words, ooze love. She said, I cannot believe these young people. They're just balls of joy. Because as well as having been traumatized and living in some ways, just a horrendous experience of life, by the same token, their heads were not filled with crap by all the adults around them, because there were none. And it's been fascinating to go through the experience with them, that when we help to eliminate the traumas, you find that you don't have a lot of the other doubts that we have in the Western world, because they've not learnt them. There was nobody to learn them from. And most of the thoughts you have are thoughts that you've learnt. You weren't born with them. You learnt them. The same way you learnt them when you were young, you can change them if they don't work for you. Whatever you have in here. Has anybody ever had go back maybe 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, you maybe had an outfit or a hairstyle which you thought, yeah, looking good. Yeah. Yeah. You went out and you thought you were looking really good. And then you look back in the photos and you think, what the... Yeah. If you can change your mind about something that you used to love, you can change your mind about the stuff that's not working. But this is again about becoming conscious of what's in here and learning how to do it. So hopefully that you'll take away from here that there are ways you can learn how to do this. There are ways you can learn how to change your thoughts, change your feelings, to put yourself in a better place, to be happier, more resilient, to succeed, and to cope with life's challenges when they come along, which they will do. So the next principle is all about embracing possibility and success. And this is a fascinating topic, because when it comes to possibility, most people perceive things to be impossible unless they have seen otherwise, or unless they've heard about it from a credible source, unless they've experienced it. The natural default is, no, that's not possible. What would happen if it was the other way round? What would happen if things were possible unless deemed otherwise? Could your life be different? I still revel and marvel at mobile phones. I think they're incredible. They are pieces of plastic, glass, and metal, I think is what you get in mobile phones. I can touch this mobile phone, and instantly, what I've keyed in there goes through the ether of this information soup. And when we think there's nothing between you and I, this is information flying around. This is information soup. And this little text message makes its way through all the other text messages and bits of information flying through the universe and the stratosphere, and gets to Sydney. Not just Sydney, it lands on my friend's mobile phone. And she's able to decipher it. Amazing. But even more amazing is she does the same, and it comes somebody else comes flying back. Now, we all know that works, but do you know how? You don't need to. And it's the same with anything in your life. But if you want to actually achieve something, if you want to experience something, if you want to do something, the first thing you need to believe is it's possible. Possible at all in the world. Because if you do not believe it's possible, you're not even going to go there. So that's the first level. The next is around ability. Do you have the ability to do it? Last year, I published my first book. Within 2 days, it was at number 2 on Amazon, which blew me away. I wasn't even watching. My friends were texting, saying, do you realise this is happening? I was like, really? How on earth did that happen? And it was quite incredible and surreal, because English was my worst language at school. My dad doesn't get it for the life of him. He seriously doesn't. He used to teach English. But he's very proud that I have a book. He carries it around. But if you told me, even 3 or 4 years ago, I would have published a book and become a best-selling author, I would never have believed it. I would never have thought it was possible. Until I did things that made it seem more possible. And one of those was I surrounded myself by others who were doing the same. I changed what was in here. And all of a sudden, my frame of reference changed. And I realized, of course I can write a book. And if I don't know how to write yet, I can learn. I can use a good editor. There's lots of things I can do to write this book. You can actually just stand and talk and have somebody else film it, transcribe it, and turn it into a book. There are lots of ways of writing books nowadays. So possibility is something to be open to. And be open to the ability that you can learn. Whenever you say to yourself, I can't, what would happen if you could? Do you have the ability to learn? I'll bet you there are things today that you know how to do that you didn't once know how to do. Things that you do automatically that you used to struggle with. When you were a toddler, you were pre-toddling, you were crawling, and you'd climb up something, you'd fall down, climb up, fall down, climb up, fall down. But most people around you are walking around on 2 feet. You believed it was possible. You kept going until you developed the strength to do it. And then lo and behold, you did it, surrounded by cheers and claps in some cases. You didn't doubt it for 1 minute. Just imagine what you could do with your lives if you applied the same level of determination and belief in yourself. The third level of doubt is usually around worthiness. Do you deserve to succeed? Oh boy, yes you do. Do you deserve to be happy? Yep. Do you deserve to be loved? Yep. You deserve all of these things, like every other person born into this planet. The only thing that's got in the way of that, if you don't believe it to be true, is what you've heard since you were born. And you can change those if you don't like them. When it comes to possibility, these kids you see here, these are the 12 kids, and this was the first time I worked with this group. And they were all living in this orphanage that you see behind us, which they do have to pay for. So half of them were going out as prostitutes and in holidays to pay for their education and to stay in an orphanage. And they came with hardly any vision for what life could be like. They'd lived at the top of a mountain. They don't have regular, reliable electricity to even see what the outside world was like. It's one of these guys, Matthew, who I'm not making out there, but I've got a picture of him later. And he used to walk and run 3 hours a day in his flip-flops in the pouring rain to get to school on no breakfast because there was no food in the house. And when I say house, it's a shack. And he'd do that there and back. Often, he didn't have the money to pay to get in, so he'd stand outside the classroom and listen because he believed that there was a different future for him. How he believed that, I have no idea, because he didn't know what was off the mountain. But something inside him led him to believe that another life was possible. And so he kept going and kept going and kept going. Now he's at university about to graduate. And part of that was all of these guys are now running either in businesses or at university because they chose to do something about where they were. Very different future that would never have been there for them had they not been open to the possibility and certainly believed that they deserved it. We had to do a lot of work with them. The quote that I have there, I just absolutely love. I listened to Bear Grylls being interviewed on a radio station a few years ago now, and he was asked, what is it that leads you to live the life that you live? And he said, well, I was taught that life was more interesting on the other side of the comfort zone. Wow. What would we be doing if we were taught that? If you were taught that when you were 2, 3. Maybe it's true. Maybe we can give it a shot. So the 7th principle that I talk about is about turning off the autopilot. Do you ever get to your destination, whether it be driving or walking, and you've got no conscious awareness of how you got there or who you've passed in the process? Yeah? It's good that our autopilot works so effectively. And we actually do reach our destination sometimes. And it needs to, because our brain cannot consciously process all the information we're taking in all the time. It's said today, in today's modern world, we are processing more through our brain in a month than people born at the beginning of the 20th century experienced in a lifetime. But it's information overload. We're being bombarded all the time, and our brain cannot cope. We're living in a modern world with a prehistoric brain because our bodies haven't evolved as quick as the world we live in. So it's really important sometimes to turn off that autopilot, to actually consciously say to yourself, in this situation, what desired outcomes would I like for myself? What desired outcome would I like for somebody else? How do I intend to be in this interaction? And that's when I use, if I'm ever faced with a challenging situation or a challenging person, I might say to myself, well, how do I intend to be? My default will always be love, I want to come from a place of love, kindness, and compassion, even if that person is difficult. But it's the intention. And stepping into that is what can actually get us to change how we are and can change that interaction. But it's also the same in terms of, if you have a dream, if you have a goal, if you have an aspiration, it's, well, how do you intend to be? How are you going to consciously step into making this happen or increase the likelihood of it happening? One of the things that we can do to really help us along our way is to develop positive relationships. You don't have to do this all by yourself, guys. It's good to be self-sufficient, but there are so many people out there who can help. And that could be having somebody that you can go to and just share ideas with. If you do have a dream, if you do have an aspiration and something you would love to do, please, please, please make sure you share it with people who are going to support you. Not the ones who are going to shoot you down and tell you it's nonsense and that, no, it's never going to work. What I'm talking about here is developing meaningful relationships with people who can help you and support you. And likewise, if you have something you'd love to go and do, then go and find other people who are already doing it. Find out from there. James Caan is somebody who talks about, one of the guys that was on Dragon's Den, one of the things he talks about is that one of his secrets to success is you just ask questions. You just keep asking questions to the right people who will guide you. Be curious. And that's what makes a difference. But this is also actually about developing relationships. A good relationship with yourself. A good relationship with success. If any aspect of that involves financial, a good relationship with money. I think I mentioned to some of you earlier that I used to run workshops on eliminating mental and emotional blocks around money, and was stunned. Every time I used to do them, stunned at the results that started to happen for people when they cleared their emotional and mental blocks around money, in terms of the financial flow that would start to happen. In the investment world, I used to work our team used to invest the lottery winners' money. Most lottery winners do lose all their money within a few years. And there are various reasons for that. Some of them think it's a bank account and aren't educated in what it's actually about and how to look after their money properly. Others don't feel worthy. They give it all away. They don't want it because they have such negative associations to money. So they do get rid of it. So no, it's a fascinating one for that in terms of the tangible side of things around relationships. So I guess anything that you would love to do, just be thinking about who could help you. Who could you connect with that would help you actually achieve that? And the 9th principle comes back again to looking after ourselves. It's tapping into whatever's going to put you in the best place physically, emotionally, and spiritually to succeed. That could be in terms of the basics of recognizing, well, do I sleep enough? What am I doing that's getting in the way of me not sleeping properly? What habits could I change? What about the food and the drink that I'm consuming in my body? What am I doing to manage my emotions? And if you are spiritual in any way, then it's looking at how you feed yourself in that way. But it's tapping into this and consciously tapping into it. So at the start of this, I said that these are things that are principles that I aim to live my life around. And by that, what I mean is that I try to steer the direction of my life a little bit. I have ideas, I have dreams, and I usually try to follow them. I'm an optimist, so they're usually big ones as well. And this is where actually understanding what motivates you is important. I talk about this with goal setting. You know, if you're somebody that's motivated by something that's really a big, audacious goal, and that is what makes you take action, dream it, visualize it, look at ways you can make that happen. As long as you're not that same person who's going to beat yourself up if you don't get there. But if that's what spurs you into action, go for it. By contrast, if you're somebody that would just scare the life out of, and you're more motivated by getting results and feeling you're making progress, set yourself slightly smaller goals. And then go through each of these principles to see what will put you in the best place for success. This is Matthew, the young guy, who I told you about, who walked all these miles to and from school. And he's just one example. I have learnt so much from these kids in Rwanda. And sometimes people say things like, yeah, but I can't change what I'm thinking. I can't change what I feel. This is just me. Was it when you were born? Who was the natural spirit? That pure spirit of love, that natural essence that you were when you were in your mother's womb, when you came out as a baby, which is still there right now. Even if you're not sure where it is, or it's been a while since you've been in touch with it. It's there. It's always there. So it's about looking at how we can tap into that. And being true to that. It's about stepping out there and being bold enough to have these dreams. And talking about it. And taking little steps and see where they lead. It's a bit like, you know, when you drive along a road. You don't necessarily know where that road's going to go, but you trust. You trust that if this is the road to Glasgow, it will go to Glasgow. You trust that whatever comes along in the opposite direction, you will cope with. Even though it's night and it's dark, you have lights. But they only show you a little bit ahead. But you trust that you will cope and you keep driving forward. Start doing that with your life. Let go of the need to know how. Let go of the need to be perfect and connect into here. The greatest gift that you can give the people that you love, the people in your community, the people at work, the people that you want to make a difference to, is you. And it's beginning to see you as a gift. You are the greatest gift already. And it's about stepping into a place where you believe that to be true. So that's what I talk about being an authentic life. It's not necessarily always easy, because sometimes we do have to face up to the things that we don't like about ourselves. And sometimes it is about admitting that we make mistakes and we get things wrong. But we grow. When I was in the investment world, I can remember when I left, it was 2003 when I left, and I'd been there for 25 years. And I can remember when I finished going into my wardrobe and getting rid of all my suits and my underwear. Thoroughly boring. I went out shopping and got lots of colour and all sorts of other stuff. I came up thinking, wow, right, this is cool. And just feeling, just even being able to wear what I wanted to wear. Now I recognise as, if I was having to dress up, that wasn't me being authentic. Being authentic is not about being scared to be different. It's about celebrating our difference. Being authentic is not worrying about what other people think. Now, I know we have to live in a society and culture where, and actually as a human being, one of our basic needs is the need for acceptance. But it's actually also about, it's getting to a place where you can just go, well, this is who I am. Take it or leave it. Some people will like me, some people will hate me. That's fine. Because I'm sure you feel the same way about other people too. So I hope in the same way that I have given, that I've been inspired by the young people in Rwanda, and especially Matthew. He towards the end of the genocide, he was very lucky in that his village was only destroyed right at the very end of the genocide, and they did have to spend some time hiding in the forest and things, but they, and he did obviously see some horrors, but he was able to survive that and hold on to his dream of education and a better life. He still doesn't know where that's going to go. And then there's another girl, Chantal, who there's been a film made, a Hollywood-produced film made about our work, which is now actually winning international awards, which blows me away. And it's because these youngsters, having healed themselves, are now healing the siblings and families of a number of people killed in what was in the US Newton school massacre, a bit like Dunblane that was in the States 3 years ago. And our kids were helping those people cope by teaching what they'd learned. And as a consequence of that, the work that we've done is quite high profile in the US. And on the back of that, there was one day, and I'm sharing this because when we're in Rwanda, miracles truly do happen. Things happen for these children. I say children, some of them are now having families because they're in their 20s. But yeah, children. Miracles happen that I've never seen anywhere else. And the only way I can rationalize it is knowing that whenever we're together, there's this heart resonance that's so strong and pure of love, kindness, and compassion, and an openness to be ourselves, and that's of us as volunteers as much as with them. It's the trusting that we can all be ourselves. There's a space for us to be ourselves. Nobody's there to judge. And people say what they would love. And I can remember on my last trip, we set the intention that we wanted to buy one of the girls, Chantal, a house. She was one of the worst affected by the genocide and what she'd experienced and seen, lived on the streets for so many years. But there was a lot of potential there, and she'd been running a shop, which we had helped her set up. And she was doing really well and very entrepreneurial. But every time she did well, in this little slum that she was living in, somebody would chuck her out the house. And when I say house, it would be a hut that had a room that she slept in and a room that she sold from, with a communal cooking area out the back and communal toilets out the back. And this happened 3 times. So we sat and we said, look, we have to be able to raise the money to build Chantal a house. And I had tried to raise the money. I've been doing a lot of fundraising over the years. But I hadn't raised enough. It was about $25,000, $30,000. And I said, let's set the intention. We're going to raise this money easily and effortlessly this time. And the 3 of us went and did a meditation, because that's what we would do. So off we went and we meditated for half an hour. The next day, the phone call went. And I don't know, does anybody heard of Anthony Robbins? Tony Robbins? In the personal development world, he's one of the most famous and globally successful people. A message from Anthony Robbins saying, I've heard about Chantal, and she wants a house. I'm here to give you the money. And he gave us the money to buy that house. Now, that was, we screamed, which you do not do. Just in case you ever scream in a hotel lobby in Rwanda, don't. They got into a little bit of a panic, having screaming people in their lobby. It freaked us out. Can you imagine what that was like for her? Completely incomprehensible. But that is what has continued to happen whenever we go out and we do things. So I hope that's given you some food for thought. And with that, I'm just going to finish with, in terms of how you can do this for yourself. Obviously, I'm talking about mastering the 9 principles. Take whatever you've heard from me today, and I hope I've given you some food for thought, some words of inspiration. Look at how you can apply this to yourself and others, and step into playing the main lead role of your life. Because when you do it, that's when things will start to happen differently for you. And just finally, ask yourself this one question. What one thing could you do to be more authentic in your life? Thank you very much.